Get your black ass out of my station.
A cop in full uniform said it to a woman alone in the lobby her first day. She stayed calm.
I have a meeting here.
A meeting? The stray dog says it owns the house.
I have every right to be here.
That killed the laugh. He grabbed her arm, pulled her toward the door.
Just get out of here, now!
You can take your hands off me.
Slap. The sound cut through the lobby like a whip crack. He leaned down, looked at her holding her burning face, and said,
"You're nothing but a cockroach trying to crawl into my station."
Many people right there. Not one moved. He thought that was the end of it. Just another nobody he put in her place. But that woman was hiding a secret, one that was about to destroy everything he'd built.
The deep sickness and the secret. Visit the city of Oak Ridge, resting on gentle hills in the south, looked like any other mid-sized city from the outside. Peaceful, growing, and orderly. But that was just a shiny layer of paint covering a machine that was rusting from the inside. And the heart of that rust was the Oak Ridge City Police Department. Over the past 3 years, this place had become a dark spot on the state map. Citizen complaints had increased extremely fast. Incidents of excessive force went up by 40%. A state audit showed a clear pattern of racism, so obvious that it became hot news on evening television. Citizens were angry. Small protests happened outside the station gates, and police officers secretly formed groups and complained about each other. But the core problem was, nothing changed. The former captain, Raymond Ellis, a tired man who was always afraid of taking responsibility, saw the warning signs on the falling wall. Instead of fixing the mess, he chose to retire early. He took his pension and left before the problem could explode on his desk. Ellis's leaving created a huge power gap at the top. Heavy pressure fell on Mayor Elena Rodriguez. She was preparing for her re-election campaign next year, and the police department's bad reputation was falling fast, dragging her political image down with it. Rodriguez knew she could not promote anyone from inside the current police force. That place was controlled by an old boys club, people who protected each other's bad actions. She needed an outsider, someone who owed no favors to anyone in that building. Someone with a strong background in internal investigations who knew how to clean up the dirtiest corners. And she found Sarah Jenkins. Sarah Jenkins, 42 years old, was a black woman with a resume that could make any arrogant police officer step back. She had 18 years of law enforcement experience across 2 states and a master's degree in criminal justice. Sarah had worked in narcotics. She had worked in internal affairs. And she had built community policing programs from zero. This was not a woman who accidentally walked into a police station. This was a person who had spent half her life understanding every corner and every heartbeat of these buildings full of guns and power. But Mayor Rodriguez did not just hire Sarah. In a secret meeting 3 days ago, she made a big decision that would change everything. "I don't want you walking into that building with a shiny title on your first day," Mayor Rodriguez said, putting her hands on the table with a sharp look. "They will clean up. They will smile and behave well when they know you are the boss. I want you to walk in there like a normal citizen, an unknown person. Let's see how they treat powerless people when they think no important person is watching." That is why, early on the morning of her first day, Sarah Jenkins did not wear a police uniform with a shiny captain badge. At 7:00 a.m. in her hotel room, Sarah stood in front of the mirror. She calmly chose her clothes for the act. She wore a crisp, perfectly ironed white shirt, buttoned up carefully. Over it, she wore a long black wool coat that went past her knees, paired with sharp, long black pants. This outfit was not messy at all. In fact, it looked elegant, neat, and very professional. But the key was, it had no badge, no name tag, and no signs of police authority. Sarah looked at her reflection. She was a middle-aged black woman, well-dressed, but in the eyes of people with prejudice, She could just be a normal citizen, coming to beg or file a useless complaint. She took a deep breath. There was no fear, only the strong focus of a hunter preparing to enter a tiger's cave. Her car rolled into the Oak Ridge Police Department at 7:43 a.m. She arrived early on purpose. She parked in the public parking lot for visitors instead of the fenced staff parking lot. She walked on the cold morning pavement toward the heavy glass front doors. Every small detail was planned. She was not just visiting her new police station, she was putting it to a survival test. And the most dangerous part was, no one in that building knew. Her appointment was kept top secret. The only person inside the station who was told was the former captain, Raymond Ellis. According to the plan, he was supposed to wait for Sarah in the lobby this morning, pretending it was a normal meeting to show her around. But right now, the lobby was empty of him. His absence seemed like a random delay at the time. But later it would be proven to be a much darker trick. Sarah pushed the heavy glass doors and walked in. The air inside the waiting lobby was freezing and smelled like cheap cleaning chemicals mixed with old coffee. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling made an annoying buzzing sound. Behind the yellowed bulletproof glass, a female receptionist was staring at her computer screen, typing lazily, not even looking up when someone walked in. Along the wall was a row of olive green plastic chairs, some of them cracked at the edges. At the end of the chairs, there was only one citizen waiting. It was a Hispanic woman named Maria, holding her handbag tightly on her lap, looking very tired and shy. She came to file a noise complaint and had been sitting there for 20 minutes with no one helping her. Everything was quiet. The silence of lazy and broken government work. Sarah, quiet in her long wool coat, walked slowly toward the reception window. She planned to ask about Raymond Ellis. She wanted to see how long it would take this receptionist to answer a woman of color, but she didn't get to speak. Dabbily, from the double-staffed doors leading from the staff parking lot, two large figures pushed the doors open. They brought loud noise and rude, joking laughter that broke the silence of the waiting lobby. The man walking in front was Mark Harrison. 35 years old, a tall, muscular white man wearing a tight, standard dark blue police uniform. The silver badge on his chest shined under the lights. He held a paper coffee cup in his hand and walked with an arrogant attitude, his shoulders wide open, his eyes scanned the room. Not with the careful look of a security guard, but with the bossy look of a king, who thought this place was his personal kingdom. Mark had 12 years of experience in the force. He had 4 complaints for using excessive force in his file, but the number of times he was punished was 0. Every complaint disappeared mysteriously. He was a protected man. Right behind him was Craig Benson, Mark's patrol partner. Benson was younger and had less experience, but he was a perfect shadow of Mark. He copied Mark in everything: how he walked, how he talked, how he showed off his power, and how he chose victims to bully. They were walking across the lobby to go into the inner office area. But Mark Harrison's eyes suddenly stopped moving. He saw her, a black woman. Not in uniform, no ID card, wearing a long wool coat, a white shirt, and straight black pants, standing tall in the middle of his lobby, like she had a right to be there. In Mark Harrison's mind, this building belonged to him. He decided who was allowed to enter, who had to bow their heads, and who was trash. And in just 1/10 of a second of seeing Sarah, the sick prejudice deep in Mark's brain automatically made a judgment. He stopped walking, his coffee cup shaking slightly in his hand. The temperature in the lobby suddenly dropped a few degrees. The storm officially began. The clash and the slap the air in the waiting lobby, which was already stuffy, seemed to lose all its oxygen. The buzzing fluorescent lights on the ceiling suddenly felt too bright. Mark Harrison stopped his steps, his heavy tactical boots hitting the linoleum floor hard. His eyes locked onto Sarah Jenkins. He looked from her neat hair down to her long black wool coat over the white shirt. and finally stopped at her calm, peaceful face. For an officer like Mark, the calmness of a person of color in his kingdom was an insult he could not forgive. He lifted his chin, his voice loud and harsh, purposely turned up so everyone in the lobby could hear. His tone was cold, casual, and automatic, like the way someone chases a street animal out of the way. "Get your black ass out of my station." The atmosphere froze. Behind the bulletproof glass, the receptionist named Carol stopped moving for a few seconds. But she didn't press the panic button, she didn't pick up the phone, and she didn't say a single word. Carol had worked in this job for 9 years. She had seen Mark do similar things. Not this bad, but she was smart enough, or cowardly enough, to know that getting involved in Mark Harrison's business would only bring her trouble. Carol looked down at her screen. In the corner of the room, Maria, the only citizen waiting, shivered slightly. But in that tense moment, her instinct told her to do something. Very slowly, without drawing attention, Maria reached into her old handbag. She pulled out her smartphone, placed it quietly on her lap, with the camera facing out, and silently pressed the record button. She didn't hold it up, she just wanted to record, feeling that someone needed to see what was about to happen. In the middle of the lobby, Sarah slowly turned around to face the police officer. The edge of her long wool coat moved slightly with her strong steps. There was no fear. There was no panic or shrinking back like Mark expected. She stood with her back straight, her arms hanging naturally but ready, looking straight into his eyes. She answered in a flat, calm but powerful voice. "I have a meeting here." Mark Harrison blinked. This answer was not in his daily script. He turned to look at Craig Benson. Benson smirked, a fake smile typical of followers who feed on someone else's power. Mark turned back to Sarah, the smile on his lips twisting into a look of pure disgust. "A meeting," Mark dragged his voice, full of mockery. "The stray dog thinks it owns the house." Sarah did not step back. Her eyes were sharp as razors, staring straight into his arrogant look. "I have every right to be here." That was the moment everything changed. Not because of the words she said, but because of her refusal to obey. Mark was too used to citizens looking down, mumbling apologies, and rushing to find the exit door whenever he raised his voice. But the woman in the wool coat in front of him did not blink. Mark's sick pride was offended. The smirk disappeared, replaced by an angry and violent face. He stepped toward Sarah. Too close. The distance was no longer for talking. It was a physical threat meant to make the other person feel tiny. Mark's large hand reached out and grabbed Sarah's arm. His grip was not gentle. It was the grip of someone wanting to throw garbage out of his sight. He pulled her hard toward the glass door. Sarah reacted with the instinct of someone who had survived hundreds of hours of combat training. She pulled her arm back hard, breaking free from his hand, her wool coat swinging. "Take your hands off me!" Her voice was sharp, loud, and final. What happened next took only a fraction of a second, but it was enough to destroy all moral rules of a person wearing a police uniform. Slap! That sound cut across the lobby like the crack of a leather whip. Mark Harrison's open hand swung and landed a full-force slap on the face of the woman standing in front of him. The slap was not to control the situation. It was a punishment. It was pure violence. Sarah's head snapped to the side. She stumbled back exactly one step. Just one single step. Mark stepped closer, leaned his head down, and looked straight into her red, burning face. His eyes were burning with cruelty. "You are nothing but a cockroach trying to crawl into my station." The phone on Maria's lap in the corner caught the whole scene. The camera caught the slap. The microphone caught the loud sound. And it caught Mark's words. But most importantly, the phone sitting so close caught a sound that the security camera on the ceiling could never hear. Right before he slapped her, Mark muttered a very dirty racial slur through his teeth. A single slang word, strong enough to strip away the victim's humanity and destroy the career of the person who said it, in the middle of the lobby. Sarah Jenkins slowly stood up straight. She raised one hand to her left cheek, which was burning and starting to swell. But she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She turned her head, staring at Mark Harrison with eyes that could freeze hell. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. That was how long she locked eyes with him. 3 seconds of absolute silence. Without needing a single word, that look seemed to memorize every line on the face of the man who hit her. Then, with her dignity still fully intact, Sarah turned on her heel. She took long, strong steps across the lobby, pushed open the glass doors, and walked out into the cold morning. Mark stood there, watching her back disappear. He fixed his uniform shirt, took a sip of coffee as if nothing had happened. He turned to Benson and nodded. "Let's go." To Mark, the whole event was just a minor annoyance, a nobody wandering into the wrong place who got handled. He didn't file an incident report. He didn't tell his boss. He just walked into the office area like it was any normal Tuesday morning. And here is the worst part. When he walked into the office, where 3 officers were working at their desks and a detective was pouring coffee, Mark loudly told the story like he had won a prize. "Some crazy lady wandered into the lobby this morning, probably looking for the welfare office. I had to throw her out the door myself." Mark laughed loudly. Benson added immediately, kissing up to him. "She had an attitude too, acting like she owned the station." Laughter filled the room. It was easy, comfortable laughter from a room where everyone agreed and no one dared to ask questions. But one person did not laugh. Officer Tanya Williams, a black female police officer with 6 years on the job, was sitting at a desk in the corner. Her eyes were glued to a file, her jaw tight. She had heard these stories before. She had seen similar things before, and for the past 6 years, she had always done one thing: stay silent. Because in this police station, speaking up didn't help you get heard. It only made you the next target. But this morning, something felt different. Tanya didn't know what it was yet. She just felt a shift in the air, like something was about to break. Meanwhile, out in the public parking lot, Sarah sat in her car, alone. Both hands tightly held the steering wheel. She looked at her face in the rearview mirror. The left side was already red, and the marks of his fingers were starting to swell. She didn't drop a single tear. Her emotions were replaced by the instinct of an internal affairs investigator. She took out her phone and took 3 photos of her face from different angles in the natural light. Then, she opened the black leather bag on the passenger seat. Inside the bag was the official letter appointing her as captain, signed by the mayor. She pulled out a small notebook and a pen. With sharp and calm handwriting, she wrote down everything. The time, the badge number. She had memorized it perfectly. The name Mark Harrison on the name tag, the face of the guy with him, Benson, and every single word they said. Her actions were cold and exact. Sarah Jenkins had just become the client in her own case. She picked up the phone and dialed a number. It rang twice before it was answered. "Mayor Rodriguez," Sarah said, her voice completely empty of personal emotion. "I've seen enough." She hung up. According to the original plan, the mayor asked her to observe secretly for 24 hours. But Sarah didn't need 24 hours. She didn't even need 1 hour. The play was over. The chess pieces were about to flip. And all the people in that red brick building had no idea that the biggest nightmare of their lives was about to begin. Building the case and the night act before. Instead of driving home, Sarah Jenkins went straight to the hotel room she rented before officially moving to Oak Ridge. As soon as she walked in, she locked the door. Sarah went straight to the bathroom and turned on the brightest light switch. She looked in the mirror. The swelling was worse. The left side of her cheek had turned from red to a dark, angry purple color, bruised and painful. Using her phone, she carefully took photos of 3 different angles of her face. The time, the lighting, the distance. She noted everything. She wasn't processing a personal injury. She was building a case file. Sarah sat down at the desk, opened her leather bag, and pulled out a blank white sheet of paper. She began writing a formal incident report, the officer's badge number. His name. She had read it on his tag, Harrison. The exact time of the meeting. Every word she could remember. Everything was written in the cold, clear, and objective professional language of someone who had written hundreds of similar reports for other victims. But this time, she was the victim. After finishing, she called Mayor Elena Rodriguez back. The mayor answered on the first ring. From her fast breathing, Sarah could tell the mayor was holding back extreme anger. "Tell me everything," Elena demanded. Sarah told her everything. No emotion added, no extra details, just the truth. What was said, what was done, how many witnesses, who was there. When she reached the part about the slap, the phone went silent for a long time. "I'll suspend him this afternoon," Mayor Elena said, her voice sharp as a knife. "No." Sarah cut in, fast and firm. "Elena, don't react yet. This is exactly what you hired me to find, and I found it in less than 60 seconds. If you pull him out now, the public will think this is a political move. We are going to do this the right way." "Then what do you want me to do? Move up the announcement," Sarah answered calmly. "Tomorrow morning, a full department meeting. 8 a.m. I want every officer in that building in one room." Elena agreed. She didn't like waiting, but she trusted Sarah completely. That was why she picked this woman. While Sarah was building a sentence in a hotel room, let's look at what was happening at the Oak Ridge Police Department. The answer is absolutely nothing. Not a single incident report was filed. Mark Harrison didn't write one. Craig Benson didn't write one. The receptionist Carol didn't write one either. In the official records of the Oak Ridge Police Department, the event of a woman getting assaulted in the lobby that morning simply never existed, and that truth was supposed to be buried forever. The lobby security camera worked on an automatic system that deleted and recorded over old data every 48 hours. In just 2 days, the video of the slap would be wiped out, replaced by 48 hours of empty hallways and officers walking back and forth. Sergeant Nathan Moore knew this very well. As Mark Harrison's direct boss, Moore had covered for him for years. That 48-hour delete rule wasn't a mistake in the system. In Moore's hands, it was a useful feature to clean up garbage. That evening, Officer Tanya Williams did something she had never done in 6 years. She logged into the station's incident report database and searched for any keywords related to the lobby that morning. She scrolled through the data. Empty. Not a single record. Tanya took out her personal phone and took a screenshot of the empty system. She didn't know what she was going to do with it yet, but she needed proof that this silence was planned. Sitting in her patrol car after her shift, she called a friend, a black female officer in a nearby county. "It happened again today, right in front of everyone, and I just sat there." Tanya's voice choked. Her friend asked what she was going to do. "I don't know, but I can't keep watching this anymore." At the same time, at a house in the suburbs, Mark Harrison was sitting at the dining table, holding a beer can, staring at the TV. His wife walked by and casually asked how his day was. He didn't even look away from the screen. Same old. Had to deal with some crazy lady causing trouble in the lobby. His wife didn't ask more. He finished his beer, went to bed early, and had a very good night's sleep. That is the detail that makes people shiver. He slapped a woman in the middle of a government building. And he slept fine, but in the hotel room a few miles away, Sarah was not sleeping. She was standing, carefully ironing the folds of her dress uniform, the formal police uniform. She laid it neatly on the bed. 2 shiny metal captain's bars, a carefully polished badge, and a black plastic name tag with clear, sharp, raised letters. Jenkins, the black leather bag was placed right next to it, full of everything. The appointment letter, the incident notes, the photos of her bruised face. She video called her daughter one last time for the day. "Mom, did something happen?" The girl noticed something different on her mother's face. Sarah paused for a second. "A small thing happened today. But tomorrow, something bigger is going to happen." 6 Constas a.m. the next morning, an urgent email was sent to the inbox of every staff member in the police department directly from the mayor's office. Subject: Mandatory all-staff meeting, 08 hours. No exceptions. Mark Harrison read the email in the locker room and shrugged. Benson asked what it was about. Mark smirked. Probably another stupid diversity seminar. Sergeant Nathan Moore read the same email in his office, but he didn't smile. The mayor stepping in directly early in the morning was unusual. A bad feeling tore at his stomach, 8 Plant AM. Briefing room. 60 officers, detectives, and office staff squeezed into rows of metal folding chairs. The room smelled like bad coffee and marker ink. People were talking in low voices, boring, casual gossip. Nobody wanted to be here. Mandatory early morning meetings usually brought bad news. Budget cuts, changes in use of force rules, or another speech from a politician who had never worn a bulletproof vest. Mark Harrison sat in the third row, Craig Benson right next to him. Both looked extremely relaxed. Mark stretched his legs out, crossed his arms over his chest, and leaned back like he was the owner of this room. He nodded to a few close guys and made a joke about getting paid overtime. Benson laughed loudly. At the back of the room, Sergeant Nathan Moore stood leaning against the wall, his arms crossed, his face tight. His face tight. He didn't sit down, he didn't talk to anyone, he just stared at the entrance door. In another corner, Tanya Williams sat alone. Her hands were locked tightly together on her lap. She didn't know what this meeting was about either. But the photo of the empty database was still resting in her phone. Mark turned and whispered to Benson. $10 says, it's just some paper pusher from the state office coming down to preach. Right then, the side door swung open. Mayor Elena Rodriguez walked in, followed by 2 assistants. She wore a dark navy blue suit. There was no polite smile on her lips. She walked straight to the podium at the highest point of the room, set her files down, and scanned the crowd. The whispering died away. Not all at once, but row by row, like a wave, pulling back into the ocean. By the time the mayor opened her mouth, the room had fallen into absolute silence. The truth on the podium and the first order. Thank you all for being here. Mayor Elena Rodriguez's voice rang out, steady, formal, and full of the authority of someone who had practiced exactly what she was going to say. I will keep this short. She cleared her throat, her eyes sweeping over the faces that were tense with curiosity. As you know, Captain Raymond Ellis has retired. This police department has been operating without a formal leader for the past 3 months. That situation ends today. A few officers shifted in their chairs. A small whisper came from the back row. Sergeant Moore did not move. After a careful nationwide search, I have selected a new captain for this department. This individual brings 18 years of excellent law enforcement experience, including deep work in internal affairs, narcotics, and community policing. In the third row, Mark Harrison was already getting bored. He glanced at his phone hidden under the armrest. Benson nudged his elbow, and Mark just looked up with a lazy expression. Mayor Elena continued, her voice getting harder. This department has lost the trust of the community it is supposed to protect. The complaint reports are public. The audit results have been exposed. The reputation of this agency is at the lowest point in history. The person I selected for this position was chosen because she has the experience, the independence, and above all, the backbone to lead and clean up this system. The word backbone hung in the air. A few officers automatically sat up straighter. Sergeant Moore's jaw clenched. Elena Rodriguez paused, looked down at her notes, and then looked up. Please welcome your new captain, Sarah Jenkins. The door at the back of the room opened, and Sarah walked in. But this was not the woman wandering in the lobby yesterday. There was no look of a common citizen. To keep her strong image, Sarah still wore the crisp white shirt, the perfectly pleated long black pants, and the powerful long black wool coat over it. But today, on the collar of her shirt were 2 shiny metal captain's bars. On the left chest of the wool coat, a polished police badge shined under the fluorescent lights, and a black name tag with clear white letters. Jenkins, her posture was perfectly straight. Her shoulders were wide. Her face was calm, cold, and completely unreadable. In her left hand, she held the black leather bag, the exact same bag she carried in the lobby. But now it didn't look like a visitor's folder. It looked exactly like what it contained, the life and death papers of a woman about to take total control of this building. She took long steps down the aisle between the chairs. Steady, unhurried, The sound of her heels hitting the floor echoed click, click in the dead silent room. 60 people held their breath, watching a black woman walk up to the podium, and no one dared to make a sound. She walked past the third row. Mark Harrison looked at her. At first, his brain only registered a familiar face. It took him 1 second to connect the image, then another second to confirm it, and then the truth hit him like a train falling off its tracks. Mark's mouth fell open. His hands gripped the armrests so hard his knuckles turned white. All the blood drained from his face, not slowly, but suddenly, like someone had just pulled a plug. He turned to look at Benson. Benson's face was also as white as a sheet of paper. The eyes of the two guilty men met, and in that single look, they both understood exactly what had just happened. It was her. The woman in the lobby. The woman he called a stray dog. The woman he slapped. The woman he called a cockroach. That woman was standing 10 feet away from him, wearing a shiny captain's badge, walking up to the podium to be introduced as his supreme commanding officer. Mark couldn't breathe. His lungs felt empty of air. Sarah stepped up to the podium. She nodded to thank Mayor Elena. Then she turned around to face the room. 60 faces were staring at her, some confused, some curious, and a few in the third row were drowning in absolute terror. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. "I am not here to make friends." Sarah's voice rang out, warm but sharp as ice. "I am here because this department has lost the trust of the people it is supposed to protect. My job is to rebuild that trust from the inside out." She paused, letting the silence do its job. "I have already seen with my own eyes how some of you behave when you think nobody important is watching." She didn't look at Mark Harrison. She didn't bother to glance at the third row. She didn't need to. Every single person in that room felt the heavy weight of that sentence. And Mark Harrison felt it more clearly than anyone else, like a knife pressed against his neck. Starting today, every complaint will be reviewed. Every use of force incident will be recorded and investigated. Every interaction in this building, with citizens, with coworkers, with anyone who walks through those front doors, must reflect the standard of this badge. She tapped her finger lightly on the badge on her chest once. "I demand professionalism. I demand accountability. And I demand it starting right now." She stepped back from the podium. There was no clapping. The silence was so thick it could choke the air. But not everyone was afraid. On the other side of the room, Officer Tanya Williams sat up a little straighter. Her hands had stopped shaking, and for the first time in 6 years, something that looked like a ray of hope shined in her eyes. After the meeting, the room emptied out in small groups. The officers walked out quietly, only daring to whisper when they reached the hallway. Sarah walked straight to her new office, closed the door, and put the leather bag on the desk. She took out the appointment letter, her handwritten notes, and the photos of her bruised face, placing them side by side. She picked up the desk phone and dialed a number she had saved before coming to Oak Ridge. "James, this is Sarah. I need you to open a formal investigation. I am sending you all the documents right now." Out in the hallway, Mark Harrison grabbed Benson's arm and pulled him into a hidden corner. Mark's voice was shaking and broken. "It's her, the woman from the lobby." Benson didn't blink, his lips trembling. "I know. Does she know? Does she recognize you, Mark?" She was standing right there. Mark's face went through 3 emotions in 2 seconds. Panic, denial, and finally, survival instinct. "We need to talk to Moore right now." But it was too late. Sarah's first official act as captain was not a speech or a policy memo. It was an evidence preservation order. In less than 1 hour after the meeting, Sarah signed an order to freeze all security camera data in the station for the past 72 hours. Every camera, every angle, every second was locked. No overwriting, no deleting, no exceptions. She knew very well about the 48-hour auto-delete rule here. She had read the technical manual before taking the job. The time left for the lobby video was less than 20 hours. She didn't even give it 20 minutes. The preservation order landed on Sergeant Moore's desk right before lunch. He read it twice. Then, he walked straight to Sarah's office, knocked once, and walked in. "Captain, is this really necessary? The server maintenance cost? We don't have enough storage space to keep 72 hours of every camera in the building." Sarah didn't even look up from her paperwork. "It is necessary, Sergeant. With all due respect, boss, we have never done a full preservation order like this before." It will raise a lot of questions. At this moment, Sarah slowly looked up. Her eyes were sharp and cold. Is there any reason you don't want me to keep that footage, Moore? Moore lost his voice. His mouth opened and closed. He stood there for 3 seconds, long enough for the silence to say everything he was trying to hide. Then, he turned his back, walked straight out, went back to his office, and slammed the door. For the first time in his 20-year career, Nathan Moore felt the ground beneath his feet collapsing. The next morning, Internal Affairs investigator James Caldwell arrived, a man with 22 years of experience from the state capitol, with no connections, friends, or favors owed in Oak Ridge. Sarah had worked with him 5 years ago on a major corruption case. She trusted him completely. Inside the closed office, Sarah handed everything over to James. I am both the complainant and the witness, so I cannot take part in this investigation, Sarah said. This is your case, James. I will step back completely. Whatever you find, report it directly to me and the mayor. James nodded. I need access to the cameras. Already preserved. You will have access this afternoon. There were at least 4 witnesses in the lobby that morning. Start with the cameras to confirm, then track them down. The trap was shut. There was no way back. The formal investigation began. Final judgment and a new dawn. James Caldwell's investigation moved with the speed and accuracy of a cutting machine. His first stop was the lobby security camera footage. Caldwell watched it 3 times. The first time he watched it straight through. The second time he paused at every key moment. When Mark Harrison approached, the argument, the rough grab, the resistance, and the violent slap. The third time, he watched it frame by frame. The video matched Sarah's report exactly, but there was a problem. The security camera had no sound. The slap was very clear, but the insults, the mockery, and especially that dirty racial slur needed a different source of evidence. Caldwell went looking for that source. And he found Maria. The Hispanic woman sitting in the waiting chairs that morning had left her name and phone number on the sign-in book before leaving. Caldwell went straight to her house. Maria looked nervous, constantly looking out the window, as if afraid someone was watching. Caldwell showed his badge, explaining that this was an independent investigation and her identity would be kept totally safe. I didn't know if anyone would care about it. Maria hesitated. I care. That is why I am here, Caldwell replied, and then Maria showed him the video. The angle wasn't perfect, a bit low and tilted, but the sound was terrifyingly clear. It recorded perfectly everything the lobby camera missed. The stray dog comment, the threats, and the deciding moment. The racial slur Mark muttered right before he swung his hand. A single cruel word that degraded human dignity. Maria did not hesitate to hand over the phone. The iron proof was now in Caldwell's hands. But a case built on one witness and one video is strong. A case built on a cycle of behavior is unbreakable. That was when Tanya Williams stepped into the light. The black female officer didn't wait to be called. She actively requested a closed meeting with Caldwell. Walking into the interview room, Tanya took a deep breath and began telling the dark history. She told him about 4 other times Mark Harrison used violence and racist words against citizens. She showed the screenshot of the empty database. She exposed how Sergeant Moore turned his desk into a graveyard for every complaint. Why now? Caldwell asked. Because finally someone walked into this building who actually wants to change it. Tanya answered, her eyes determined. The formal interviews began. Mark Harrison walked into the room with his police union representative. He was well prepared. Deny, minimize, and redirect. I was just following standard procedure with an unidentified person in a restricted area. She refused to leave. I used the minimum force necessary to escort her out. Mark recited his script clearly. When asked about the slap, he made excuses, calling it accidental contact while trying to control her. Caldwell didn't argue. He quietly played Maria's video on the phone. The room fell into silence. Mark heard his own voice. He heard the insults, the slur, and the loud slap echoing clearly. Mark's face froze. His hands gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. The union rep leaned in to whisper something in his ear. But Mark couldn't say another word. He knew his career was buried. Craig Benson, when separated from Mark, broke down quickly. Caldwell only had to remind him that standing by while a partner uses illegal violence without stopping them carries the same crime as the attacker. Benson panicked. He confessed everything, confirmed the slur, confirmed the slap was on purpose, and admitted to Mark's history of abusing power. Finally, there was Sergeant Nathan Moore. His history of covering things up was too clear. 5 years, 4 complaints against Mark, all closed as unfounded, after just a few days of lazy investigation. Worse, Caldwell found a text message from Moore's phone sent to former Captain Ellis the night before Sarah took office. "Don't rush in tomorrow morning. Take your time. I'll handle the morning." Moore had purposely kept the only person who could recognize Sarah away from the station. Whether it was purposeful sabotage or a cruel coincidence, that message was the final nail in the coffin of his career. The disciplinary hearing took place on a Thursday morning, 9 days after the slap in the lobby. No press, no cameras. Just a closed room on the second floor of the Oak Ridge Police Department. Sarah Jenkins sat in the head seat, not as a victim but as the captain, the person holding ultimate decision power. To her right was Mayor Elena. To her left was Investigator Caldwell with a thick file of evidence. Mark Harrison was called in first. He wore his uniform for the last time in his life, his face empty and hopeless. His lawyer tried to save him with words like rare incident, years of service, and chance for rehabilitation. Those words fell flat on the cold table. Sarah let the lawyer finish. Then she spoke, her voice steady like reading a court sentence. "Officer Harrison, based on the findings of this investigation, including the use of excessive force against a citizen, the use of racist language, the purposeful failure to report an incident, and behavior unworthy of a sworn officer, you are officially fired from the Oak Ridge Police Department, effective immediately." She wasn't yelling, she wasn't gloating. "Your file will be sent to the state licensing board to permanently remove your law enforcement certificate. At the same time, the full file will be sent to the district attorney's office to consider criminal charges." Mark sat completely still for about 10 seconds. Then, with shaking hands, he took off the badge on his chest and put it on the table. He stood up and walked out the door. No one watched him go. Nathan Moore received the next sentence. He was stripped of his sergeant rank and suspended without pay. All the complaints he handled over the past 5 years would be reopened by an independent board, and his pension fund would be audited. 20 years of closing his eyes to the truth were burned down in just one morning. Finally, Craig Benson. He walked in with red, exhausted eyes. Caldwell noted his cooperation as a reason for a lighter punishment. Sarah looked at him for a long time. "Officer Benson, you are suspended without pay for 60 days. After you return, you will have to complete a mandatory retraining program and serve 2 years of strict probation. Any violation will lead to immediate firing." She paused, her voice getting harder. "You had a choice in the lobby that day. You could have stopped it, but you didn't. That failure does not disappear just because you cooperated later. But I am giving you something Harrison does not deserve, a second chance. Do not waste it." Benson stood up, bowing his head with tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Captain." In less than 2 hours, 3 careers were decided. One was destroyed, one was stripped of power, one was hanging by a thread. And the person who made it happen was the woman who got assaulted in the lobby 9 days ago. But Sarah did not stop at firing bad cops. Firing them was only half the job. The other half was making sure this never happened again. Within 2 weeks, she ordered a full reform package, mandatory body cameras in all public areas, an independent citizen review board, changes to use of force rules, and anti-bias training taught directly by outside experts. 6 months later, the State Oversight Board published its new quarterly report. For the first time in 3 years, the report for the Oak Ridge Police Department did not use the word deficient. Maria, the brave woman who recorded the video, received a formal letter of apology and thanks from the police department. She pinned it to her fridge, smiling to herself that she did the right thing. The Oak Ridge Police Department 6 months later looked the same on the outside. Same old floor, same fluorescent lights, same bulletproof glass, but the feeling had completely changed. There was a citizen contact desk right at the entrance. Officers actively greeted citizens, not because they were forced to, but because they understood it was the right thing to do. One afternoon, a young officer even knocked on Sarah's door to ask for advice on how to handle a domestic abuse case. Instead of copying the bad habits of the older generation, Tanya Williams was promoted to sergeant. In the exact same briefing room where Sarah once showed her true identity, Sarah personally pinned the new badge on Tanya's collar. "I spent the last 6 years living in fear, afraid to speak up," Tanya whispered, holding back tears. "I don't want anyone else in this department to ever go through that feeling again." "Then, make sure it doesn't happen," Sarah replied with a smile. At the end of a long workday, Sarah sat in her office, opening the familiar black leather bag. The appointment letter was still there. But next to it was something new, a framed photo of her and her daughter at a community barbecue hosted by the police department. There, police and citizens were laughing, existing in the same space without fear. She closed the bag, put on her wool coat, and walked outside. She walked past the main doors, the exact place where she was pushed 6 months ago. She stopped for a second, looking around the lobby. Looking at the spot where Mark Harrison had tried to take away her dignity, Sarah didn't feel angry. She didn't feel like she was showing off a victory. She just felt a quiet peace, a proof that the worst day of her career had become the first day of a better era. A woman who knew how to turn pain into power and use that power to bring justice to the people who needed it most.